So first of all, we can install globally the Nest.js CLI. Nest.js is basically Angular for backend,
Okay.
in the sense that it has like controllers, services, modules. You will see a very similar structure.
Mhm.
And we have this basically this command, which is nest -- version. This is the Nest CLI. So we can do something very similar when you create a new project. So we can do nest new live nest. And this will scaffold your app in a few seconds. I don't know if that's true. I'll use npm because I want just to do something simple. It seems that has done something. So now let's step into this folder. For example, we can do this. Here you can see a module, a service, a controller, the nest-cli.json. So something which is familiar, let's say, if you are familiar with Angular. I want to install some dependencies in this project because this not all the Nest.js projects, they have to be connected with a DB. So now we are going to install the dependencies, which is of course an npm package, to connect with Mongoose. I don't know if I pronounced that well. I hope yes.
Yeah, it's good.
Yes. Also, this is the type.
So you're using not only Nest, but so is Nest TypeScript by default?
Yes.
Okay.
Powerful. Yes. To start, we can do just nest and start. And usually it takes a while. Okay. Yeah, we have this fabulous application. So,
Hey.
okay, this means that at least it's working. So I'm happy. I can just stop this. We are going to create a controller, a service, a module, and a model file, a TypeScript file. You can do nest G, which stands for generate, controller, users. It has created a users folder with, of course, a .spec.ts file. This is also Angular. There's also this one. So we have this empty controller. We can create a service. Then we have a module. Now we can also, so now as you can see, we have this controller, service, and module file. So we also need to create a simple file. This is not the Nest.js, but Dutch is a and so in the source users, we call this user.model.ts.
Okay.
We have these 4 files, the structures. Let's start. By the way, I'm using GitHub Copilot. I hope that this can help me. There we go.
Yeah.
If you know what GitHub Copilot is doing, it's great. For example, here I know that this is correct. Here we're creating basically a model, just a name, email, and password. And also we can export some interface. It looks. Here we can have, I think, the same stuff. This is great. Just I don't know you, but
much less typing.
And then, of course, Mongo DB will help us with IDs, right? Now we are in the service. So we are building bottom up. So now the service will use the model or inject the model, and this is super nice. Model, and this is just a user. We don't need to add the .ts because we are in TypeScript, so we don't need that. We have this service. This is amazing, but let's see. Let's try to create the model maybe a little bit by hand. Otherwise, this stream it will be too short, of course. So we have a name, an email, and a password. The interesting thing is this save. So this basically will be handled by Mongoose package. Okay, get all users, I like that. Okay, nice. Perfect. So in this case, we are getting the user model again, and we're just basically find everything. Okay, so in this demo, we'll just use this because we have other stuff to do. We have to set the DB, the Docker file, and I'm also lazy. So let me copy just the import. So we have this, and the controller will use the service. We will use the dependency injection. Let's import it first of all. As you can see here, we have this at post, and of course, this stands for post verb in the HTTP request. So async create. Maybe we can remove this because I want to. Yeah, I wanted to create in this because I think it's a bit better for the example. So we can, maybe in this case, it's easier to understand what's going on. So let me do this. We get the username. I don't know if it was also username or not.
It was name.
Perfect. So we generate the ID and then we also return this. Perfect. Okay. So in this case, we want to return this when we create the get. We don't want to do the single get, but let's just do a get all. I remember the thing. Literally, it writes it by itself. This will be a get request, and this will be post request. If you want to concatenate in the URL, I think you have to add something here, but we will have something at /users. So this will be just a get request to get them all. To create something, we will make a post request at the same URL. The module is basically a single package that you can use, and it has some functionalities in this Nest project in a similar, very, very similar way as Angular. You have a default module, which is the one which basically runs your application. And then you can have other modules inside the project. So in this case, we will have this users module. So we have to import some stuff. Here we don't use this, but we use user schema. We need the Mongoose module. We are importing this module. This is a module, can you see, inside the Mongoose. This is what we have installed before. So maybe in this module, there is not only just the types of TypeScript, but also the module of Mongoose itself. It has a very similar structure. So for example, we can have the controllers and providers in a very similar way. So we have the user's controller and user service. It's going well for now. Let's go in the app.module.ts. So something that we need to remove, because this is just an automatic import that I know that this doesn't work. So this saved me some headaches during the live stream, because it's, I don't know why it has added this module default, but I have another module. So I know why, because I've added them, the controller and the service, before writing the module. So they have been added in the default one, but I don't want this. I want to import them as a module for the users module. I still have a bonus, right? So I'll Mongoose module. Okay, now we are at a very important part, and I think that I'll start to ask your help. Just I've copied this very long line. For people who are used to MongoDB Atlas, this will sound very familiar. And as you can see, I have already my environment variable that have a user, a password, and a DB. Okay, Jesse. So now it's your turn to jump on stage and help me.
There you go.
Okay.
Well,
there we go. So can you explain a bit what is MongoDB Atlas, how it works?
Atlas is the cloud database platform. So instead of installing MongoDB locally and having to manage it and manage upgrading it and security and all that sort of stuff on your own server, you can use the cloud platform and let us manage it all for you. It's so much easier. It's completely free, free forever. You just sign up and get a database. Basically, just connect to it with the connection string, which will show you how to get to that connection string.
This is a very clean interface. I like that. For this demo, I'll just start with this one, which is just this free one. Starting with free, so I can create this instance. Okay.
And then it's multi-cloud, so you can pick between whichever cloud you're used to, AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and then you can pick whichever region is closest to you and your users.
I like Highland, so I'll take the Highland one. Usually I use Frankfurt. We have this free tier, cluster tier, additional settings, cluster name. I don't have much fantasy, so it will be called the cluster
just leave the defaults.
Yeah, it's better. Can you explain the difference between this local and cloud environment?
So it depends on like where your deployment that you're trying to access is deployed. So if you're just coding locally versus if you have something deployed on the cloud, what you're trying to connect to, and that's the difference there.
Nice, perfect. Okay, so let's close it. Can you tell us how can we connect to this Cloud DB?
Yeah, the Atlas Cloud Database Platform. So first of all, when MongoDB is set up, it's completely locked down. You can't access it from anywhere. So that was the first things that we just did there. We created our database user to access it, and we created our network access. So that's why it was asking local versus cloud. So it's basically asking where are you connecting from. And right now we're connecting locally. So it was using your IP address, your actual IP address. And so now only you or computers on your network can access this database, and not only that, but you also have to have the username and password. So if anyone on the live stream somehow saw your username and password, they still wouldn't be able to access it because they're not connecting from your network. Super secure. And then the only other thing that you need after that is your connection string, which you can get by clicking on that connect button there now.
Of course, but I think we can show the connection string.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
not.
you can.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, it's not going to show the password in there.
Nice.
So now you have different ways of connecting. You can connect through the shell. You can connect through your application or through MongoDB Compass. So if you go ahead and click on the connect your application one in the middle there, then it's going to show the connection string, which you can then copy into, that's what you just showed there, the MongoDB plus SRV, and then that whole string there has your username, password, and the database you want to connect to. Yeah, so right there, browse collection.
I click the cluster. Yes, if I click the cluster, here in the collection, I want to show that here we have database is 0, collections 0, because we still have not connected our application with this DB. So I want to show that later, if I don't do any typos, we will have something different here. Let's kick in with the Docker part, and I'm not hiding that this is my favorite part. How do we containerize this application, and why, for example, do we want to use Docker for this application? So in this case, we are not using an image from Docker Hub, because this Atlas service, it's already deployed on the cloud. So we did something super simple, and this makes my life easier, of course. So we have this application locally, but we have done a couple of things. So for example, in this case, we have installed the Nest CLI, and we need the node installed on this machine. We are going to create 3 files. These 3 files are, the first file is called Docker ignore. Let me create the files and then I'll explain everything. Of course, just if you want to ask me anything.
Yeah, no, this is the fun part, because I love to learn. And so I don't know much about this. So
this is why I invited you. So we have 3 files: Docker ignore, a Docker file, and a docker-compose.yml file. The Docker ignore file, if you know Git, it works in a very, very similar way as a Git ignore. So if you know Git and Git ignore, you know that what is written here, it will not be copied, for example, when you push on GitHub, right? So the Docker ignore works in a very similar way. We can write folders and files that we don't want in the image. For example, just node modules for now. We will use a Docker file to build an image.
Docker file with no extension.
Docker file, no extension, with capital D. Of course, you can use a different name, but this is the default file that Docker already expects. So you don't have to define the name of the Docker file.
Okay.
So we'll start from, the good thing is that you don't have to start from scratch. So you can start from base image. This opens something. And Docker Hub is very similar as GitHub, but it stores Docker images instead of GitHub repositories. For example, the Node team has created this. The Node image is very, very well done on Docker Hub. It also has support for different architectures. Now here, we can do some stuff. And this is interesting because GitHub Copilot is suggesting something that we are not going to use, but we can, for example, in production. Here, for example, we'll do something that you usually don't see because you don't code for an Nest.js application. So exactly.
So you've got to get all of these things installed in the image first before you can actually start using them. Okay.
Exactly. So I don't have to remember, because let's say that I want to run this project on another machine, but I don't have Nest. Don't have the Nest CLI. I'll install the Nest CLI. Another important command for the Docker file is the copy command. The copy command copies, unsurprisingly, folders and files from here, the local system, inside the image file system. So we are basically copying these files inside the image file system. Maybe command can say, okay, so let's copy everything. But there is a better way to do this. We can copy just the package.json. Dot, by the way, it means inside the file systems. So this is the source, and this is the destination. But in this case, we do this. Run npm install inside the image file system. So before copying everything else, copying the rest of the code, we copy just the package.json, and then we'll do a run npm install. So this, of course, depends on the language, on the technology. For Node.js, it's very straightforward.
You're getting your base setup, and then now you're adding your custom files.
Yes. Now we can do this. And now this means it's super simple, but it means copy everything inside the image file system. If we do this without the Docker ignore, we will copy our local node modules inside the image file system. And this is not something that we want to do. But for example, maybe we want still have these node modules in our folders. Then and expose a port. And by the way, just tell me this, not many people will tell you this. This is not really mandatory. So even without this, it will work anyway. This is more to inform that we will use this port, but we are going to, we will see where we will really open the port internally and externally. Docker uses something called the networks to make the containers communicate each other. Okay. We isolate them from the host machine. And now something which is called CMD, which stands for command. This is the default command that we want to use when we run a container. We basically do what I was doing before on the CLI. So Nest.
Okay.
Of course, this can be replaced. We can do different stuff, but this is, if I do Docker run, it will be the same as doing Nest start. And this is very important because this can really depend on the type of the application that we are about to run. If this is a Node application, probably it's like Node index.js. If we have a Flask, we have Flask, I don't know, start. I can't remember even the run. This is basically makes the application agnostic. So I do just Docker run. I've not used Docker run, but something similar. Instead of running by command line the commands to build the image and run the image, we will just do a very fast forward here, and we will create the Docker Compose. So Docker Compose is mainly two things. It is a CLI tool written in Go now, and it also has something called Docker Compose file. This will make our life easier, makes the creation of the services more convenient. So usually you use a Docker Compose when you have multiple services. Instead here, we will just have one service. Here we can have like 3, 4, 5 services. It depends if you're front-end, back-end. In this case, since the service, the Mongo DB Atlas, it's on the cloud, we will just have one service, which is okay for this application.
So this will allow you to have like multiple images, but all at the same time, basically.
It allows you to, yes, more or less, yes.
Like start them all up at the same time.
Yes. In the Docker Compose, they are called the services, just to make a little bit of confusion. But you will have, we'll have one service, which is basically a container based on the image. By the way, container name is to define the name of the container. If you don't define a name of the container, it will get that random name, but we want always the same name. Image is the image defined for the container. So let's change a little bit just to don't make it much. Since we have defined this image, but this is not an official image on Docker Hub. This is something that we will have on our local machine. We need to define something which is called build. And here we have a context and a Docker file. The context is basically the folder. The Docker Compose will look for the Docker file. It's like this. I would have called this path. The Docker file is the name of the file. So in this case, we can also remove this, but I leave this like it is. And here we have to define the ports. We want to show the interface between the external port and internal port, because the containers, they communicate in the same networks, but of course, they have to communicate on the outside in some ways. So in this case, we'll just have the port, I think it was at 3000, externally and internally. But for example, I can also use a different port inside and maybe use a different port outside. So in this case, we'll just use the same port. But we need to open a port, otherwise the service will not be visible from the outside. I'm writing something that I don't really need to write, but I'll do this anyway, because by default, the Docker compose file, it looks for a .env file in this folder, but I want to be very explicit here. So I'm doing this, which is basically the default. But as you can see here, we have the user, the password, and the Mongo Atlas DB. Let me show that we don't have any images here. Okay, so now a very interesting command is docker compose build. We can skip this, but just to have an idea. So if we do this, docker compose build, we'll check the docker compose. If some images, we just have one, if some services have the build key, and then it will build the image. This is done, by the way, by default. If you do docker compose up, but I want to show that in this way we are showing this step, and then it's easy. Once you get the idea, it's easy to just skip that also with another command. We also have an error, of course. Check.
There we go.
Okay.
One little typo. Yeah, so that makes sense. Yeah, I've always just used Docker Compose Up. Makes sense. Like you build it, that's like the steps build.
The Docker Compose Up does so many things that if you have never done this, you don't know what's going on. For example, here we have this error, and I'm sure that it's about the build and not the run of the container. Docker Compose Up, it checks if it has the image. If it doesn't have the image, it builds that. Okay, so it seems it has done something. Now let's do Docker images again. This one is this one. So it is this image, this one on the line 7. Repository and tag is basically this image value. This is the image ID when it has been created, the size. Okay, nothing is running on our machine. If we do docker ps -a, which stands for all, we don't have any container. So now what we can do is we run a container based on this image. The good thing is that we will not use docker run, but since we have docker compose and we already have this image, we just have to do docker compose up.
So that checks to see if it has an image. It's going to already find it, and so then it's going to start loading it. Cool.
I see good things. I'm still not sure, but let's see. So let's try docker yes. Again, I want to show you a little command just to have an idea of containers and images. So now I am on my machine, and if I do node -- version, my version of node is 16. Now I do this command, docker exec, which is to execute a different command for a container. So if I do stop, so instead of using this nest start, I want to do something indifferent. For example, bash. This will execute a terminal for the container. No, I need to add the -at. So I need to make this interactive and open the terminal.
Gotcha.
The options. Can you see here we have this root. This is the ID of the container. And if I do ls here, we are inside the container. And check this. If I do node -- version,
14.
version 14, because we are inside the container now.
So you're basically on another computer.
Exactly.
Virtually.
Yeah. If you are not familiar with containers, but we have a sysadmin background, we was basically SSHing inside the container. I do this in quotes, but just to have an idea of what you can do. Nice. Okay, so this was just a little bit more just to have an idea. Now, let's do the final test.
Yeah, we need to create a user.
First of all, we are again here on the cluster 0. Let's refresh. Nice. And here you see now we have a collection. This is a database, and this is already this is a collection. Okay.
Collection. Yep.
Okay. So we have this.
So Mongoose creates a schema. And that's really on your application side. Right now in MongoDB, there's technically no schema set up. So you're setting up those boundaries within your application. So right now there's nothing in the collection. There's no data there. So there's really no way to see anything right now.
I want to just do a couple of things. I want to populate this collection, and then I want to get them back. Let's try a new request.
This is Postman.
Okay. Yeah. So let's try localhost, because we are still accessing our localhost.
Okay.
Let's do here. Yes. Can you see here? First of all, we don't get an error, so this is a good thing.
Yeah.
So we are getting an empty array,
Array.
which is correct because there are no users in our NoSQL DB. To create a user, we can just do a post request. I forgot the format, so let me go back on the application here. Name, email.
There we go.
Okay, I want to do the safe one. Okay, so
there we go.
We will have a name.
Got to format it properly with all the quotation marks.
And let's use your name, your email. I don't know. This one. By the way, there is no any email validation here.
Yeah. It will accept any string at this point.
I don't know if you have this one. That would be nice. And of course, you should store an encrypted password in your DB. And I hope this is not your password of your credit card. Let's send. Nice. Hey. And here we see something which seems that it's working. That we have this object that has a name, email, password, and other stuff. It's just this underscore ID, which is very useful for a Mongo database. Let me add also me here. So I'll be your buddy in the DB.
So if you don't specify an ID, then MongoDB will automatically create an object ID. It's JSON, but it's technically BSON.
BSON, yeah.
So it creates an actual object, which is called object ID, in BSON for you.
We have a more secure password than you, so I'll also add the 7 there. Okay. If you try to get all the users again, now we'll have these 2 users. So this is already looks fine to me. Let's also check this on the, let me refresh here. Here we have the 2 entries.